Hello again, and welcome to Huddle Psychology and to our YouTube channel. I hope you've been keeping well. Last time, in our last session, we dealt with the major issue of burnout. And today, as promised, we are talking about another different topic, entirely different from what we've considered before. However, it is a topic that I have been mentioning in almost every single video that we have done so far. And that topic is boundaries or setting boundaries. I've always mentioned that boundary setting is one of the most important things that we need to do to maintain our physical, emotional, and mental well-being, no matter the circumstances and situations we find ourselves in. So I thought it's a good idea to actually talk about boundaries in a little bit more detail in today's video. So as always, let's begin with a working definition of boundaries. Boundaries are basically nothing other than limits. They are limits we set in our relationships to kind of protect our emotional, physical, and mental well being. That's what boundaries are. They are kind of a personal fence, if you'd like, that protects our space and yet helps healthy relationships to flourish. So, boundaries are basically nothing other than setting limits to our relationships to safeguard our physical, mental, and emotional well being. So, that's what boundaries are. And there are different types of boundaries: emotional boundaries, physical boundaries, boundaries on your time, and maybe even digital boundaries. So let's talk about them. Emotional boundaries, you can set boundaries around what you want to engage in and what you don't want to engage in from an emotional point of view. For example, you may say, I'm not comfortable talking about that or discussing that right now. Maybe you are grieving, for example, and maybe it is some other sensitive topic and you do not want to emotionally engage in that topic right now, and you can clearly set that boundary when it comes to talking to another person. That's emotional boundary setting. When it comes to physical boundaries, once again, it's pretty clear and straightforward. It is about protecting your personal space by saying something like, please do not touch me or my belongings without my permission, without my consent. And that is setting a very clear physical boundary. Thirdly, we can talk about time boundaries. In other words, boundaries that you want to set on how you spend your time. For example, you may say, I'm not going to stay late after work. And that sets a very clear precedence, very clear limit or boundary in terms of how available you are after work or with respect to office hours. And finally, digital boundaries. Maybe that is something that you want to consider when it comes to engaging with technology. You can perhaps think of saying things like, I will not be responding to work emails after 7 p.m., for example. That sets a very clear digital boundary. Or I will not be looking at my smartphones at all, or any digital device for that matter, after 7 p.m. And you might want to do other things such as meditation or reading a book or getting yourself ready for a good night's sleep by avoiding screen time. So you create a very clear boundary when it comes to digital interaction. So these are some different types of boundary setting, and we looked at the definition of what a boundary is. Now, having said that, it's not always respected, unfortunately. Not everyone respects your boundaries. Now, why do people violate boundaries? That's an important question to ask. Well, first and foremost, it is because of a lack of awareness. Many people don't even realize that they are crossing a boundary, especially if the boundary has not been clearly communicated. So, lack of awareness is one of the main reasons why people violate your boundary. Secondly, entitlement. Sometimes some people feel entitled to your time, entitled to you, um, because they have this sense of feeling that you are available and they will prioritize their own needs over and above yours. So they have this sense of entitlement over your time and you, to push their own agenda and to prioritize their own needs over and above yours. So, entitlement or a sense of entitlement is another reason for boundary violation. Control or manipulation is yet another reason for violating your boundary. Very clearly, by violating your boundaries, they get a sense of control, or they might be violating your space as a manipulative technique to exert pressure on you or to get you to do things that you do not want to do. So, as many manipulative techniques we looked at in the past, control is one of the insidious reasons for doing such things, even boundary violation. And cultural or familial norms. So, for example, in certain families, certain cultural contexts, the concept of boundaries don't even exist, and where boundary violations are seen as something of a norm because they are not even considered, respected, or even recognized. So, culture and familial norms as another role and another driver when it comes to boundary violations. And then some people, of course, want to keep testing your limits just to see how hard they can push you to do something or to be with them or whatever it may be. They might want to test your limits and therefore they keep pushing your boundaries. So, these are some fairly easy to understand reasons as to why people consistently deviate from your boundaries or violate the boundaries that you have set. Now, what are some signs that your boundaries are being violated? So, here are some signs to watch out for. First and foremost, ignoring your no. You've clearly said no, and consistently the person or people, as the case may be, keep ignoring that and they do what you have said no to. Whether it is engaging in topics of discussion or whether it is coming to your home unannounced, whatever it may be, they consistently ignore your no. You've clearly said no, but they consistently break that. They completely ignore your no. Overstepping limits you have set. It's again kind of related to the previous point. You've clearly set a limit in terms of what you expect the other person to do, and they keep consistently overstepping it. Whether it is your time, whether it is coming unannounced to your house, these are clear signs that they are violating your boundary. Using guilt or manipulation. We have seen this before in our prior videos. Sometimes people can make you feel guilty for setting boundaries by saying things like, "Oh, I thought we were close. Why are you doing this?" So they make you feel guilty for setting a healthy boundary. So that's another telltale sign to watch out for. Then there is minimization of your feelings. People might say that, "Oh, don't make such a big deal out of it." I don't think it is such a big deal. they keep minimizing your feelings, and those feelings that are enabling you to set boundaries, they minimize them so that they can consistently jump over your boundaries. So that's another sign to watch out for. Consistently disrespecting your time. Now, this is something that you can really notice. So they are consistently late at coming to meetings, or consistently late in coming to meet you. Um, they expect you to drop everything at the drop of a hat to accommodate them. They don't respect your time. So that's a telltale sign to watch out for when it comes to violating your boundary. So consistently disrespecting your time and obviously crossing physical and emotional lines. Whether it is talking about subjects and topics that touches a nerve, or someone touching you physically without your consent. These are all clearly signs of boundary violations. So these are some signs you should watch out for when it comes to boundary violations. Now, when people do violate your boundaries, what does that do to you? What's the impact on you? Let's look at that. Well, first of all, emotional burnout. We looked at the concept of burnout in our previous session. Well, in this case, you are going to be emotionally burnt out just continuously trying to exercise your boundary, trying to keep your boundary in place, trying to keep people out of, not sitting on your fence and people out. So that requires a lot of emotional work and leads to emotional exhaustion. So you're going to be emotionally drained out to consistently keep your boundaries in place. Secondly, erosion of self worth. So when someone's consistently breaking your boundaries, consistently jumping over them, violating your boundaries, you feel unworthy of your needs. You feel you're not important enough for them to consider that your boundaries are important. You feel disrespected every time someone violates your boundary, and that chips away at your self-worth. So erosion of self-worth is a very major, serious impact on you when it comes to boundary violation. Anxiety. You can be on the edge all the time, watching out for people who might actually violate your boundaries every now and then, and that creates an enormous amount of anxiety. Always on the edge, watching out for people who might be constantly looking out to violate your boundaries. So that's a major mental health impact on you because of boundary violations. Resentment in relationships. It leads to continuous violations, lead to distrust in relationships, and that leads to resentment in relationships, and eventually it makes it so difficult to maintain healthy connections. So relationship breakdowns happen constantly when there are boundary violations happening. And finally, the physical symptoms. So you can be drained, uh, not only mentally and emotionally, you can be physically tired of exercising your boundaries. All of these can lead to physical symptoms such as illness, headaches, stress, and all sorts of other heart disease problems that can have, all of this can have physical manifestations on your body. Not to mention, if the boundary violations have got to do with physical boundary violations, it can quite literally leave scars on you. So these are all some major impacts when it comes to boundary violation. So if this is happening, then the question is, how should we respond? How do you respond? Right. First and foremost, communicate very, very clearly as to what your boundaries are, set clear expectations, what is acceptable behavior and what is unacceptable behavior. So communicate as clearly as possible. Be assertive without being aggressive. You don't have to be aggressive at anyone in order to be assertive and in order to stand your ground and say that this is the line that I do not want you to cross. So use I statements, be assertive, and stand your ground and set your boundaries. Thirdly, hold firm on your boundaries. I can't emphasize this enough. Do not be wishy washy. Consistency is key. So hold your boundaries every time, all the time, so that you don't send mixed signals. And if there are mixed signals, then you're increasing the chances of boundary violations. So be consistent and exercise your boundaries all the time. Use consequences. For example, you can say that if you keep doing this, then I will not meet you again, or I might have to limit our interactions. Or in extreme cases, you might even say that I'll report you to the police. So you can clearly use consequences to use as threats, even to address boundary violations, and even inform law enforcement agencies if the cases are becoming very, very serious indeed. So use consequences. And finally, as I just mentioned, distance yourself is if necessary. In extreme cases, you might want to completely cut off from relationships, from people who are consistently crossing boundaries that you have set. So that's one yet another way of responding to boundary violations. Now, if violations have happened, how do you prevent from violations from happening again? That's another question that we need to address. Again, first and foremost, set boundaries early in the relationships. Very early in the relationships, set what your expectations are so that there are no confusions, there is no miscommunication, and that the other person is very clear as to where you stand with respect to whatever you want to set boundaries around. So, whenever you're getting into a new relationship, right at the outset of it, set pretty clear boundaries without being aggressive, but be assertive enough so that expectations are very, very clear. Secondly, lead by example. You need to respect other people's boundaries if they have to respect your boundary. So always lead by example and respect other people's boundaries as much as you would like others to respect yours. And that's a very, very important point to keep in mind. Be consistent. As I mentioned before, do not give mixed signals which increase the chances of boundary violations. Stand your ground, be consistent with your boundaries every time they are on the verge of being violated. And finally, educate yourself more about boundary setting and share your knowledge so that more and more people are aware of this concept, this idea of boundary setting. Remember, setting boundaries is not being selfish. It is about self respect and self care. And it's important that everybody understands that, not just you. They too need self respect and self care. So it's in everyone's interest to educate, to share the knowledge, and to spread understanding and awareness about the concept of boundary setting. It's good for all relationships, it's good for everybody in the system. Because remember, one of the first reasons for boundary violation is lack of awareness. So, in order to fight that, you need to communicate, you need to share your knowledge, you need to practice boundary setting, lead by example, and help spread greater awareness of this concept so that boundary violations do not happen to you or to anyone else. And hopefully, perpetrators who are violating boundaries due to lack of awareness or knowledge, will actually stop continuing with that kind of behavior pattern. So it's important to share your knowledge and educate others as much as possible. Now, the final segment: how do you support others who are already experiencing boundary violations? Please, as always, listen and validate. Do not be judgmental. Understand that their views are important, their feelings are important, validate them. Secondly, encourage assertiveness. As I mentioned before, help them become more and more assertive. Maybe you can play role playing games with the person. That can help in people exercising and playing around with being more assertive in their communication by playing role playing games, taking on different kinds of roles to help them understand what standing ground, setting boundary, and being assertive is all about. So please help them by encouraging assertiveness. And finally, be a supportive ally. Now, especially if boundary violations are happening in groups or in family settings, stand with them and help spread awareness about the concept of boundary setting, so that boundaries are not violated at all. So this video talked about boundary setting. That is all about boundaries and boundary setting. Boundaries, as I mentioned before, is nothing but setting limits on our relationships to protect our emotional, physical, and mental well-being. They are like fences that protect our physical, emotional, and mental space, yet ones that allow for flourishing of healthy relationships. It's very, very important for us to understand that boundary setting is not an act of selfishness, it is an act of self respect and self care. We looked at some of the reasons why people violate boundaries. We looked at how it impacts you, what kind of problems you tend to face when your boundaries are violated. We looked at how to respond to boundary violations and how to prevent them in the future. And we also looked at how to support people who are currently facing boundary violations and suffering from that problem. So that was all about boundaries and boundary setting. If you want to learn more, as always, this video is going to be supported by a long form article on our blog website, huddlepsychology.substack.com. Please visit our site to learn more in depth about what boundary setting is all about. As usual, the article will be supported by extensive list of references and suggested readings if you want to go deeper into the topic. So do subscribe to our blog to be notified of more interesting topics to be covered in the future. Now, as far as this video is concerned, if you liked it and if it has been even remotely useful and helpful, please like it, share, and subscribe to our channel. Please also provide us constructive feedback in the comment section below, and that will help us improve our content. And so we look forward to hearing from you. Also, if you would like to have one-on-one sessions or consultations with me, please write to me at rahul@huddlepsychology.com. You'll find my email address on this video and also on my website, huddlepsychology.com. So do write to me and I'll try and get back to you as soon as I possibly can. So once again, thank you for watching this video. As always, until next time, please keep flourishing, and I hope to see you again next week with yet another new topic. Until then, bye-bye.